Hello everybody, JGC Anime here, and today we are going to be reviewing the live action adaptation of One Piece. So yeah, without further ado, let's just hop right into this. So I know I've never talked about One Piece on this channel before, but I have watched it before. I've mentioned it in a few videos, but I've never reviewed it or anything because I don't really want to. I just like watching the show. So when I knew this live action adaptation was coming, I was very curious to see how they would do it. So even though I wasn't super optimistic, I decided to sit down and check it out, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on that live action adaptation. So yeah, without further ado, let's just hop right into this. So what is the plot of the live action adaptation of One Piece? Basically, it starts out the same as the anime kind of does. The main character Luffy goes off aiming to be king of the pirates and winds up on the ship of Alvida, and he tries to find a way to grow his crew and slowly become king of the pirates. And that's all it really starts with before things get into crazy stuff later on. But yeah, we're just gonna roll with that description. It's not the best, but we'll roll with it. And yeah, so in terms of spoiler-free thoughts, honestly, I had a good time through a lot of this. Not all of it was good. Primarily the storyline that follows Usopp, which I can get more into in the spoiler section, but that storyline with Usopp is by far one of my least favorite of the storylines. I believe it's episodes 3 and 4, but again, we'll talk about that more in the spoiler section, but it is by far my least favorite storyline of the bunch. Behind that, in terms of storylines I wasn't super big on, would be the story of Nami, but as I said before, we'll talk more about that in spoilers. But those two storylines in particular, I wasn't a big fan of how they handled them, because they do have some of my favorite moments, and I can go more into what worked and what didn't. But again, move on to the spoiler section. So in terms of characters, I think my favorite has to be the character of Sanji. Sanji is by far my favorite character of the bunch. I really like his attitude. In the original, I don't love him a lot. I find his extreme simping kind of annoying at times. Sometimes it works for comedic effect, but other times it just gets on my nerves. And this version of him, where he's more of a flirt rather than a simp, is actually a lot more fun to watch and really adds a lot to his character instead of just being, I'm in love with this person, that person, that person. It definitely makes him a lot more fun to watch, and that led to him probably being my favorite character of the bunch. But he's not the only one I really liked in this. Also the character of Buggy. I'm sure a lot of people have said this by now, but Buggy's casting, the way he acts in this show, is amazing. I love the way Buggy acts in this show, and I love the way they handle him in a way that doesn't feel like he's just kind of there. He actually feels like he's essential to the plot, and I really enjoy how they work through everything with him. And also the main character Luffy. Luffy was fantastic. I definitely feel like Luffy, out of everyone, felt the most like his anime counterpart. I found the actor did a lot of amazing work giving life to Luffy, and while I do like Sanji the best out of the characters, I do feel like Luffy is an extremely close second, as he really nails everything about being Luffy and just gives so much energy to the character, and I honestly love the way the actor handled him. And yeah, moving on to the next thing I'd like to talk about is Kobe. As I mentioned before, I don't want to talk about too many spoilers here since it's meant to be the spoiler-free section, but Kobe does get more focus in this. I'm not going to say how he does, but he gets a lot more focus in this than he does in the original anime, and I really appreciate that. It definitely felt like a lot of things were handled a lot better with his character in this version, and I really like how he feels more essential to the plot than just vanishing after the first episode. And yeah, I definitely feel like the ending of this season left a lot of hype for me. Most of the episode was fine, but the ending of this season was super hype. I really enjoyed it, and I'm very excited to check out more from that, since overall there was a lot of really good moments in this season. And in terms of an adaptation, it actually has some really good moments. But yeah, I can't really talk about much else without spoilers, so we're just going to the spoiler section now. Here's a timestamp on the spoilers, and if you have seen the show, I'd recommend sticking around and hear my thoughts, but you should skip to the end so you don't get any spoilers. But if you have seen it, stick around. You might agree with something or disagree, and you could put it down in the comments about how you feel about that. But yeah, I'm going to count up from 5 and enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so when I mentioned before that I didn't really like how they handled Usopp's story, honestly, it's just my big feelings overall with his character. I feel like Usopp in this season is kind of undermined, because even in his story, the whole story with him and the guy with the knives, I can't remember his name, but basically the whole storyline was meant to focus on him in the original manga and anime. He has a bigger role to play in that. Sure, he might not have been the final fight in the end, but he still plays a massive role. But in this version, he's kind of just there. He'll do a cool thing here or there, like say, alright, normally I'm a coward, but I'm gonna protect you. But then, rest of the time, he's just kind of scared, and I just feel like, even though that is kind of like early Usopp as a character, even in the earlier stuff, had some awesome moments. And in this arc especially, he had a lot of awesome moments. And so many of those were cut out. And I feel like everything that built up what made the original so good was taken away because the entire story takes place within the mansion of Usopp's friend. And I just feel like a lot of the intensity wasn't really there. Like, it just didn't feel like the same arc. It didn't feel like the same story. And when Usopp joins in the end, it doesn't really feel like he earned it. He didn't really do almost anything. In fact, the storyline focused more on Nami and Zoro than anything else, because the second episode focuses a lot on Zoro's backstory and goes over his character. And the second one, or maybe it's the first one, I don't remember, but Nami has a good heart-to-heart with Usopp's friend, whose name I, for some reason, cannot remember. I think it was like Kara or something. But basically, those guys have more connections in the story than Usopp does, even though he is meant to be the main focus of this arc and this whole story. And the worst part is he doesn't really have many more moments to shine after that. I don't even remember him doing almost anything in the stuff with the barista or whatever the heck it is that the crew went to get Sanji. He barely really does anything there either besides introduce everyone to Mihawk, who's looking for Luffy. And that's it. He doesn't really do much else. He doesn't really add much. The only other thing after that is when he defeats one of the fishermen. He really doesn't add much to the plot. And it's upsetting because I really like Usopp. He's one of my main favorite characters of the original story. Seeing him go through all the stuff he's gone through really makes me want to root for him and have him succeed, because Usopp is such a great character. But in this, he feels extremely downplayed, and I wish we could have seen more of him, since he really doesn't do that much for the plot in this live action adaptation. But moving on past that for now, the next thing I want to talk about is the storyline I felt was kind of awkward for me personally, and that is the Nami storyline. Like, I like the Nami storyline. It's one of my favorites of the group. Like, in terms of the stories they handled, I think that Nami in the original anime handles it quite well. I think that story is really good, and the way it's handled is so well handled, and Oda definitely knew what he was doing when writing it. However, in this version, they skim out a lot of really good moments, so they could rush the plot along and move things forward, which I get that there's a reason behind that. You know, you only have 2 episodes to tell these stories, each one's an hour long, you only got so much time you could tell things. But at the same time, I wish they didn't cut some of the things they did, because some of my favorite moments are actually stuff that involves what I was talking about before with Usopp. Usopp had this awesome moment where he tries to talk with Nami, and Nami has to prove to the Arlong pirates she's with them, and so she pretends stabs Usopp. And that moment is really impactful in the anime version, but that's just not there. Once again, as I mentioned before, Usopp's put in the background, doesn't do much. He adds almost nothing to the plot, and seeing this storyline cut one of my favorite moments. It's not even just that moment as well. There's this other moment where Nami confronts the village, and when she tells them that she's been faking all this time to try to get Arlong to release her village, then they all tell her, we've known all along, we've known everything, we've known all the things you've been dealing with for now on, but now we're gonna go fight Arlong. And that's when Luffy steps up, and Nami's like, please Luffy, help me. And while that moment still makes impact in this version, since it is in this version of the story, they try instead to make it act as if the group never knew. And it's not even act, they actually for some reason don't know in this version. None of them know the truth behind Nami's betrayal. And to me, that feels like it kind of loses the impact of what made the original so good. The fact that they all knew and were pretending to hate her, so that way they were able to help her keep moving forward, feels like it's lost now that they actually hate her and don't know her plans. And it feels like a lot of that is lost due to cutting that stuff out. So there are some good moments in there, but I feel like other times they really aren't handled well. And I feel like the changes they made to Nami's storyline are some of my least favorite changes they've made. And yeah. But moving on past that for now, one thing I want to talk about is the Mihawk fight. I saw so many people hyping this up, and they were like, oh my gosh, guys, the episode 5 is so good. It's so freaking awesome. You gotta check it out. I watched episode 5, which has the Mihawk fight in it, and it is kind of underwhelming. In the original, this guy called Don Krieg or something, I think that's his name, shows up and starts wrecking up Sanji's place. And then after that, Mihawk just shows up, cuts the dude's ship in half, and that's where Zoro and him fight on the ships. And the battle that ensues is really impactful because even though there are so many other things going on, the fact that Zoro is able to focus and fight against Mihawk is truly an awesome moment. And in this version, it's just kind of fine. I feel like it's underplayed a bit. The fight does not feel as intense as it did previously, especially with Dawn Creek being killed off earlier in the episode. It definitely didn't leave the same impact on me as the original anime version did. And I know I feel like I am comparing the anime a lot to this, but that's just because I am. When you're somebody who's watched so much of the anime, having to compare it to this is kind of the only thing you can do. You have to think, all right, what did this do? What did this do? And is one better than the other? And while I do think that some of the changes they made in this were nice, such as the fact that Nami wasn't there when Luffy took on Alvida, I think that was a understandable change because, you know, she doesn't really add too much before the stuff with Zoro and everything. But I feel like in terms of what happens, I feel like all the changes they made with Nami and all the other stuff were actually quite well done in the first 2 episodes. As the first 2 episodes are honestly some of my favorite parts of this live action adaptation. When I watched the first 2 episodes, they blew by in the blink of an eye. I was having so much fun while watching them. They were so entertaining. And Buggy, as I said before, great job. Really loved the way Buggy was handled. And he definitely was the highlight of this whole season, as he got to play a more massive role than he did originally. And I definitely feel like he was by far the best villain in this adaptation as thus far. And honestly, just episodes 1 and 2 were just a blast. Were they perfect? No, but I had a lot of fun while watching them. And it's a bit sad that after that was followed by Usopp's storyline that I definitely feel was a bit weak and honestly really lowered my opinion of this show by quite a bit due to how underwhelming it was, since there's a lot of annoying stuff in there. But then there's also the Nami stuff and the Sanji stuff, and the Sanji stuff honestly was also pretty solid. While it wasn't perfect because of the Dawn Creek stuff being gone, I still had some good fun with it. It was still enjoyable. I still had some fun. It was only after that one went back to focus on another character with Nami that things kind of fell apart a little bit and weren't as fun as they could have been. But it was still a decent storyline overall with how they handled Nami. Just, I wish they didn't remove so many of my favorite scenes from that just because they need to save time. But yeah. Moving on past that for now, I'd like to go back to the Usopp storyline for just a bit. It's not something big. Basically, I want to describe how they handled it. Basically, because they didn't want to have the entire village and all these pirates become part of the story, they have pretty much the entire storyline take place in the mansion of Usopp's friend. And because of that, they had to kind of mix things around and make it so that way everyone else who serves under Usopp's friend is one of the crewmates of our main bad guy. And they were annoying. They were super annoying. I hated them. I wanted them out. I hated them. They were so annoying through the overall plot. I just feel like they didn't add anything. They were just there to kind of set things up for the main bad guy, and I just couldn't stand when they were on screen. The one girl was just hissing at the other dude who's just has the stupidest costume design I have ever seen. Those two just really didn't work for me personally. I mean, if I remember correctly, they are in the original anime. I might be wrong about that, but in this version, they were probably the worst part of that whole storyline. They were so freaking annoying, and I wanted them off screen as soon as possible, but that's probably just me. I was probably the only one who found them to be really annoying and wanted them off the screen, but again, that's just me. But returning to a bit earlier, I want to talk about the Kobe stuff right now. In the original series, as anyone who's watched the anime or read the manga know, after Kobe first meets Luffy, they don't talk again for a while. It takes them a while before they finally meet up again. We see how much Kobe has grown since then. And I like how in this version, rather than just leaving Kobe be and moving on, we actually get to see him grow as a Marine and slowly form his opinions. And I think that's a really good character growing moment, as we had to focus a lot on the Marines in this compared to the original series where they're not a massive focus. And I do like that. That's one of the few changes they made that I actually really appreciate. I loved getting to see more about the Marines and understanding their side of things, and it definitely added a lot to the overall story, which made this whole storyline just that much better. And I really liked how they handled that. But yeah, overall, I really liked this. I didn't love it. I definitely feel like there were a lot of things that could have been handled a lot better, but I still enjoy this adaptation overall. There were still some things I didn't like, such as Arlong's design. Really didn't like how Arlong looked. He looked weird and not at all really like Arlong. Maybe that's just me personally. I didn't think he looked almost at all like Arlong, and I didn't love his design. And I don't know, the voice is a bit too deep. It was kind of hard to understand him at times, but I still had a good time. I still enjoyed myself during lots of moments. It wasn't perfect, but I still enjoyed myself. I still had fun. And at the end of the day, I cheered. I cheered when the Straw Hats went off on their next adventure to the Grand Line. And if there was more coming out, I'm in. I'm in to see more. Because even though it wasn't perfect, I still had a good time. And yeah, that's all I had to say. So we're at the conclusion of this video. And what are my final thoughts? Overall, not a bad adaptation. I wouldn't say it's as good as the anime or manga, but it still had some good moments in there, and I really enjoyed it. And that's why I give live action One Piece a 7 out of 10. Needs some work, not as good as the main story, but still has some good moments in there that I really liked. And I definitely feel like with a bit more work, this could go down as one of the few good American-made live-action adaptations of a Japanese manga, since I've heard about some of the other ones that have come out. I don't really know anything about them. I've never watched them, but I hear most of them are pretty bad. But yeah, overall, I had a good time with this, and I'd love to see more. So yeah, that's all I really have to say, and thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I always look into anime fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!